And we are live. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience, and I've continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 7 seasons. Let's make it 8 in 2021. But enough of me. I'm here for you. On today's episode of the FV Show, we are going to continue with our divisional previews all through the lens of fantasy football. We are going to stay in the AFC. We're going to be talking about the AFC West today. So if you're excited about team previews for the Kansas City Chiefs, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Las Vegas Raiders, and the Denver Broncos, be sure to hit that like button down below. Also, smash that subscribe button so you never miss a video from me. And last but not least, follow me on all social media platforms at FFVulture. But without further ado, let's just jump right in. And we're going to kick off with the Kansas City Chiefs, the reigning AFC champions. And let's just talk about them just a little bit. I actually did a whole preview, a whole breakdown on the Chiefs as a whole a few weeks ago. If you want to check out that video, as well as I did a Chargers one too, links to those will be in the description. So for these two teams, I'm really just going to run through a quick recap of my thoughts before we transition into the Raiders and the Broncos. So here's where I stand now a few weeks later on the Kansas City Chiefs. And to be honest with you, not a whole lot has really changed. Patrick Mahomes, you're going to spend up early for him. He's going to be a top 3 quarterback unless he blows out his knee, gets suspended for PEDs, or anything of the matter, but it's okay. It's just not worth it. The way that the quarterback position is currently just oversaturated like crazy. Spending that early of a pick on a guy like Patrick Mahomes doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You're just tanking value essentially, and there are better caliber players at other positions that you can take that are more valuable than getting Patrick Mahomes in the back of the second or the early third round. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now in Superflex League, different story, right? Because quarterbacks are even more valuable, so you're going to go Patrick Mahomes early and often. I have no issue with him in Superflex Leagues. One of my favorite players to talk about this offseason has been Clyde Edwards-Helaire, second-year running back for the Chiefs. And guys, I am so in on Clyde. I think he's probably my favorite player in fantasy right now, just because of the discount that you're getting him at. So what happened last year was Clyde came in, had all the hype. We were drafting him in the first round, and we were wrong. Kinda. If you look at what Clyde actually did last year, his numbers were really solid, and I've been yelling at this from the top of my lungs pretty much all offseason. He had, in his first 10 games, 8 of them were in double figures, and I think it was 9 or 10 of his first 13 games, he was in double figures. He unfortunately just wasn't finding his way into the end zone, which really is just an anomaly in that Andy Reid offense and the offense that the Chiefs run that is so high-powered and high-scoring. So I love Clyde where you're getting him at right now. You're getting him in the back of the second to early third if he slides. And again, this was a guy that we were drafting in the top 5 last year, essentially. And so you're getting a guy who has that same upside a year later on a down tick because he underperformed last year, and the only thing that really held him back was the touchdowns. Le'Veon Bell's gone. He's going to have that backfield. Darren Williams is going to be in there a bit, but not enough, I think, to actually make an impact. And I'm really excited for Clyde this year. One of my favorite targets in fantasy drafts in 2021. Tyree and Travis Kelsey, this one's pretty easy. You just rope the two in together. Draft them. They're good. They're very good. We know the positional advantage that Travis Kelsey is, and just going through Kelsey this past season, I guess this offseason rather, and looking at just how dominant he actually was, it was the thing that made me shift my mindset entirely around going early tight end. I guess it's not the entire thing. Having Mark Andrews in Dynasty and realizing just how great it is to have a tight end who you set and forget definitely played a part in that. But just seeing how great Travis Kelsey has been, I mean, just year over year, tight end 1. And you look at what he did last year, where he finished, I believe if my numbers were correct, he finished as wide receiver 3 and running back 7, I think, last year, if you were to just compare him by positions. So when you get to that spot in the back of the first, where that top tier of running backs go, it actually almost makes more sense to go Travis Kelsey first instead of Davante Adams, Tyree, or Stephon Diggs, just for a third name there. because of the positional advantage that you're going to get. Right, for context here, Travis Kelsey, the gap between him and Darren Waller and what I just told you, I think in total, Travis Kelsey was the number 8th overall player in fantasy outside of quarterbacks last year. Where was he? I think he was 8th, if I'm not mistaken, right? Six running backs, 3 wide receivers, finishes there. 8 or 9, give or take. My math is a bit off right now. I mean, that video was a bit ago, so you guys can go back and watch that, like I said. But with the positional advantage that you're going to get with Travis Kelsey, the drop-off between him and Darren Waller is literally 50 points and like 25 spots in terms of complete fantasy football rankings. So when you look at that kind of drop-off, you know the positional advantage that you're going to get, and we know how deep the wide receiver room is just across the league, right? As I just was talking about in my AFC North preview, you can wait on wide receiver literally until the 6th round this year, and your team will be perfectly fine. So being able to do that with Travis Kelsey, you grab the positional advantage, stack him up with a running back on the turn, and then just later on in the draft, you hammer out wide receivers. You're going to have a really good start for your team off the bat this year. Tyreek Hill, just what else are we really going to say here? Like, right, Tyreek's going to Tyreek. Tyreek's going to have games where he just goes crazy. Like, this is just kind of the Tyreek Hill thing. 160 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, win your week for you. He may have a game in there as well where, unfortunately, Kansas City jumps out to a lead early. Let's say Kelsey gets in the end zone as well as Clyde, and then they don't really need to utilize Tyreek Hill in the variety of ways that they do so he gets kind of game scripted out. Those games are few and far between, though. Tyreek Hill is a pivotal role in this offense, and he obviously is the number 1 wide receiver and one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, which is why we are drafting him pretty much 1 or 2 off the board at the position. No concerns about Tyreek for you this year. However, the one player that I want to talk about that I have major concerns about is Mecole Hardman, because I've been on this bandwagon. I just don't see it. Like, what are we doing here? We've been waiting for Mecole Hardman to break out for the past 2 seasons. Hasn't even come close to it. We haven't seen a relevant wide receiver 2 in Kansas City in almost a fucking decade. Like, when was the last time that you can name a fantasy viable wide receiver 2 for Kansas City? Because before Tyreek Hill, it was Dwayne Bowe. Remember, over Dwayne Bowe, and there's just there is no history of a relevant wide receiver 2 for the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm off of Mecole. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Yes, he's free in draft, so if you want to take the shots, by all means, go ahead and do so. I just expect him to be off your roster by week 2, to be honest with you. Let's shift gears now to the Los Angeles Chargers here. We'll get a breeze through this one pretty quickly as well. Justin Herbert, I think the hype's gone a bit too far. Like, this offense obviously has incredible potential, and we saw what Herbert did last year. I just think that we're due for some natural regression. This defense is going to be much better than it was last year, and I just kind of expect a sophomore slump. The big reason for this is just when you look at what Herbert was asked to do last year, he was literally asked to put the team on his back, and they were going to go as far as Herbert would take them, which is great because you have Herbert, who is this big, strong quarterback, but I just don't expect that to be the case for them this year. I mean, that defense was completely decimated all of 2020 to the point where, again, that was the game plan. It was, we're going to put the ball in Justin Herbert's hands and just kind of be Superman, is essentially what Anthony Lynn asked of him to do. And he has the weapons to do so. Like, that, let's not get that confused. When you look at Austin Eckler, who's back and healthy, Keenan Allen's obviously there. So I love those 2 guys just because I know what I'm going to get. And we saw how great Austin Eckler was with Justin Herbert last year, just getting check down after check down. Keenan Allen, again, just a target machine and a PPR godsend. But Mike Williams is who I really want to talk about here. We saw Mike Williams have a stud rookie season. And since then, in the 3 years since, we have seen nothing but inconsistency. Nothing but. Like, you just can't start Mike Williams and ever feel confident about it. Let me pull this up real quick. What do I want to type in? Player profiles. Should have had this pulled up earlier, but it's fine. AFC West. Alright, so this is what Mike Williams did for you last year. He played 15 games. He had 3 games as a wide receiver 1, 1 game as wide receiver 2, and then he had, let's do a quick math there, 11 games outside of the top 36. Like, when are you ever going to start Mike Williams and feel good about it? Just based off of that. You're not. And that's been the story with Mike Williams year over year. And there's no real reason to believe that he's going to take this next step forward. There really isn't. Because when you look at the target distribution, last year Hunter Henry had 94 targets in 15 games. Mike Williams had 85. Like, Justin Herbert's first read is going to be Keenan Allen, and then it's going to be the tight end position, and then it's going to be Austin Eckler. So unless he's taking a deep shot to Mike Williams' consistency is going to be nowhere to be found. And that brings me to probably my favorite tight end, my favorite late tight end, I should clarify, in the draft that nobody's talking about. And that is Jared Cook. Jared Cook comes in from New Orleans, where last year he got in the end zone 7 times. He had 6 games as the tight end 1. He had 60 targets, 37 receptions for 500 yards, and that Saints offense was a disaster last year. And as a result, Jared Cook really didn't look that good. But what do you believe about Jared Cook? I think with the position that he's in on this offense, where he's going to slide in and just automatically eat up 100 targets, what more could you ask for a tight end that's going currently, let's check this out. I know he's free in drafts because of just what's happening right now with this position. Jared Cook right now is being drafted at tight end 23 at 1504. I think I have Jared Cook as my tight end 9, I think, on the year. And the consensus I think I saw has him at like tight end 19. I'm so high on Jared Cook. I don't think he's done. I think this is probably going to be his last year. But in this last year, he steps into an opportunity where he's going to get 100 plus targets. If everybody's so high on Justin Herbert, then by association, you should be relatively high on Jared Cook. He replaces Hunter Henry. I don't think Mike Williams cements himself into like that true startable weekly guy for fantasy purposes. And as a result, somebody's going to have to be the number 2 pass catcher on this team, outside removing Austin Eckler out of the backfield. And it's going to be Jared Cook. I'm so excited to grab him late in drafts. If I don't spend up early on a tight end, that's the guy that I'm gunning for. All right, so that's my quick recap on the Chiefs and the Chargers, the guys who I'm looking at, the guys who I'm not. And now let's actually dive into the Las Vegas Raiders, and we will also dive into the Denver Broncos. Excuse me. So let's start off with the Raiders here. I don't know what to do with this backfield. This backfield has given me fits all offseason, to be honest with you. Current ADPs for both Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake. Josh Jacobs is currently running back 16, going at 301, and Kenyon Drake is currently going at running back 41 at 812. And to be honest with you, I don't hate Drake's ADP. Like, in that spot, I think Kenyon Drake is actually a really good value. But when we talk about Josh Jacobs, a guy who finished at running back 8 overall last year, despite some injuries, like, we just haven't seen it. When I say we haven't seen it, Josh Jacobs has never had the opportunity to have all of the workload. This is a guy who is super talented. I think he's only 23. And we've been waiting for Vegas to just hand the keys and the backfield over to Josh Jacobs. And then this offseason, they signed Kenyon Drake. And Josh Jacobs was a guy who I was trying to target in Dynasty before the Drake signing. Like, I just believed so much that Jacobs was going to come into this year and just basically have his foot to the gas. And, like, this was going to be his role in that workhorse role. And it's no longer the case. So when you're looking at players to draft, where you're drafting Josh Jacobs, like Josh Jacobs is at 301, Chris Carson is 303, David Montgomery is 303, DeAndre Swift is 306, J.K. Dobbins is 209. Like, if I'm ranking situations, I want Carson first, because he's probably the best running back in that group, and then he also is on the best offense as well. So we're going to go with Chris Carson. And let's remove J.K. Dobbins from this equation because J.K. is off the board a spot earlier than Jacobs, so we'll just assume that he's gone. I want Dave Montgomery next because he's going to be the only guy in Chicago, or at least one. I don't really believe in Damian Williams all too much at this point in his career. So David Montgomery, who still has a workhorse role, and then you look at Swift or Josh Jacobs, like which one would I rather have? Like that feels like a toss at that point. But I know damn well right now that I want Carson and I want Montgomery because I know their roles and their opportunities on their current team compared to Josh Jacobs, where I just have no fucking idea. So I'm way lower on Jacobs than I think the consensus is right now. Let me pull up my rankings real quick. I know I'm definitely lower on Jacobs than current ADP. Again, his current ADP is running back 16. I have Josh Jacobs at running back 24. And that should probably be moved up, admittedly. I'm looking at it right now. I'm probably moving up to like running back 21. But even still, that's 5 spots lower than his current ADP. The talent's there. Like, there's no denying that. He's just not going to get the opportunity that I want my number 2 running back to have for just consistency purposes. Like, who gets the goal line work? Like, I feel like that's like a legitimately viable question. Who gets the goal line work in Las Vegas? So that's where I'm at on Jacobs. When you look at Kenyon Drake, again, Drake his current ADP is running back 41, I believe I said. I have him ranked at running back 34. Because when I look at across the league at backup running backs who I have confidence in starting as my flex option, or like God forbid my running backs are so depleted that I'm starting them as a running back 2, give me Kenyon Drake. Give me the guy who's fucking done it, right? Kenyon Drake was not great last year, but you still saw it, right? He was still productive towards the end of the year and really got it going in the back half of the season. But being able to just look at what I have Kenyon Drake's numbers right here pulled up. Like, Kenyon Drake scored double digit touchdowns. He got in the end zone 10 times. Josh Jacobs got in the end zone 12 times. Jacobs had 6 games as a running back 1. Drake had 3. Jacobs had 4 games as a running back 2. Drake had 5. Jacobs had 2 games as a running back 3. Kenyon Drake had 3. Right? This team gave Kenyon Drake a 2-year, $11 million guaranteed deal. And I think there's incentives for it to become $14.5 million overall. So when you look at the opportunity and what this team did this offseason, like, Kenyon Drake is going to be involved. And where you're getting Drake at in comparison to some of the other running backs. Let me just read you off some names here. We have, going around Kenyon Drake, Gus Edwards or Kenyon Drake. I think that's actually a really fair spot, to be honest, because of just the way that Baltimore's rushing offense works. But then you have Drake or Singletary, Drake or Tony Pollard, Drake or Jamal Williams, Drake or Alexander Madison. Like, Kenyon Drake is seemingly one of the last viable week-to-week handcuffs that you can start, if that makes sense. Right, you're not going to play Tony Pollard unless Zeke is down. You're not going to play Jamal Williams, probably unless DeAndre Swift is down. We'll see how that situation unfolds. Same thing with Alexander Madison and Dalvin Cook. But getting Drake in the back of the 8th round, if you're going 0 RB, like, Kenyon Drake is absolutely a guy that I'm targeting in the back of that 8th round as maybe my running back 2. Again, if you're going 0 RB, I never advise that. Again, running backs win you championships. Don't do 0 RB. Don't ever do it. Don't ever do it. Please don't. But like, Kenyon Drake or AJ Dillon, like, that's a valid question. Kenyon Drake or James Conner, like, that's a valid one as well. Kenyon Drake or Trey Sermon, interesting. Kenyon Drake or Michael Carter. As of right now, I'd rather have Kenyon Drake than Michael Carter just because I don't know what that Jets backfield situation is going to shake out to be. And that is where we're at right now with Kenyon Drake. I just believe he's actually such a value, even though this backfield is probably going to be hair pulling to some degree, I would imagine. Just being able to look at the value of what Kenyon Drake can provide in a pinch for you, that's going to be the real value of Kenyon Drake this season. Going over to the wide receivers now for this team. Listen, we all know where the offense runs through in Las Vegas, and that is Darren Waller at the tight end position. But this team still has to field wide receivers, right? And what we saw last year was a banged-up Henry Ruggs. We also saw a banged-up Bryan Edwards. This team brings in John Brown this offseason. Tyrell Williams out of there. Tyrell Williams also did not play last year. So this wide receiver room is really just a repeat of what it was last year. Now, the only difference is what can health do for this room? When you look at the ADPs now of some of these guys, let's just focus. I really just want to focus on Bryan Edwards and Henry Ruggs, because what you have here is a really interesting scenario, which I can't recall ever happening for fantasy, at least as far as I can remember right now. Normally, we're always going to have a wide receiver one for a team just naturally slide well below where they're going to finish. I'm looking at this right now. Like Corey Davis is right now the wide receiver one for the Jets, and he is currently going at wide receiver 50 at 11:10. Henry Ruggs is wide receiver 48 at 11:02. But like that's kind of the point that I'm making here, is you have an opportunity, depending on if you go Bryan Edwards or Henry Ruggs, to get the number one wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders. And you're getting them at different points, but the thing about it is you also are getting them both late in drafts, and they both have very different styles. So when you look at Henry Ruggs right now, who's going at wide receiver 48, 11:02, you're getting, we know what Ruggs is, right? The Tyree comparisons, guilty. The number 12 overall pick in the draft just didn't connect with Derek Carr last year. Made a few big plays, but you saw the flashes of Henry Ruggs last year. They weren't consistent, I would know, but with Ruggs, by all accounts, if you go back and you watch the tape, like him and Carr just didn't sync up. And if you recall last year in the offseason, Ruggs had COVID. I don't know if he had COVID or if he was a close contact with somebody, so he missed part of the offseason program. He also was in a moving accident, and he cut up his thigh, so like there was an injury concern there. Pulled his hamstring in like week 2, I think it was, or it was even in week 1 after the big play that he had against the Carolina Panthers. And we just never saw Henry Ruggs have the opportunity really to piece it all together last year. And with Bryan Edwards, who profiles as I think Bryan Edwards is 6'2", or 6'3", just a big body, strong bodied wide receiver, a prototypical wide receiver one for a team who's usually in the X spot. But the big concern with Bryan Edwards is health, because he was hurt last year, he was hurt during his career at South Carolina, and that's always been the big knock on him. So you have an opportunity here to call your shot on one of these two wide receivers for the Las Vegas Raiders, and it's all a matter of preference and how you want to play the wide receiver position. By and large, I like prototypical ones, but I also love speed guys as well, so you can kind of see where I'm a bit conflicted here. I'm a big believer in Henry Ruggs, just the talent. I don't know if I'll ever love a player coming out of college as much as I loved Henry Ruggs. I mean, you just watched it. Alabama put him all over the field during the 2020 season, and honestly just throughout his career, the 2019 season, excuse me. But Ruggs could just be utilized in so many different ways, and I felt like that the Raiders handcuffed him to that deep threat when he can do so much more than that. So that's kind of the argument for Ruggs, is that you're going to buy the bounce back. You're going to buy that number one wide receiver off the board in the 2020 draft hype. That's what you're looking to buy when you go with Henry Ruggs. When you go Bryan Edwards, you're actually going to look for more consistency, right? Just having that prototypical number one profile, big strong body, a guy who can just jump ball, red zone threat as well. It's all about what you believe and what you want. If I'm taking the shot on one of them right now, I really don't know. And that's what scares me. That's what scares me, to be honest with you. Looking at this, and just looking at current ADP, like Bryan Edwards is going at wide receiver 66 at 1502. Like, he's free in drafts. Like, that is a great last pick for your team. Or do you go with Ruggs? I'm probably going to go with Ruggs. I'm probably going to go with Ruggs just because the big difference for me is going to be draft capital. Just, you don't draft Henry Ruggs to be just a deep threat with the number 12 overall pick. You just don't. And I'm also going to buy the bounce back and the connection that he has with Derek Carr. I think that gets synced up. I'm excited to see him play this year. And that's going to be just a separating factor is draft capital and the fact that there was just no way that Ruggs was that bad last season. And then lastly, we'll wrap this up with the tight end position and Darren Waller. I mean, Darren Waller, just a historic season from him last year. 145 targets, 107 receptions, almost 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, 11 games of the tight end 1. I mean, Waller was incredible. Waller is the number 1 option on this team in terms of pass catchers go. I don't really expect that to change, to be honest with you. And looking at where he's going in drafts, I mean, if you are drafting early, this is one of the strategies that we really talked about. Me and my friend Evan did. If you're drafting in like that 4 spot and it's 4, if you're drafting 1 through 4, it works really well here to where you go stud running back in the first, and then on that second round, you're looking to go, probably you would go Waller there, and then on the way back, you either pick up another wide receiver, you pick up your first wide receiver, or you pick up another running back. That's one of the things that we're really interested in doing this year, just because it sets up your team so nicely to where you still get a positional advantage at the running back position, you get a positional advantage at the tight end position as well, and then just either balancing that out with a super team and you go with a stud wide receiver like an A.J. Brown, Calvin Ridley, whoever in the third, or you just load up again at RB. So just kind of looking this out and playing it out. Let's say we're at 104. You're going to go Kamara, and then in the second round, on the back of the second, you're going to go with Darren Waller, and then you're going to go, let's just go with another wide receiver here on that turn. It would be like Keenan Allen, Terry McLaurin, CeeDee Lamb. Pretty good. Or if you want to go running back, Chris Carson, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift. Like that's a really good start and one that really benefits you if you're drafting in the early part of the first round. So that's what we got for the Las Vegas Raiders. Not a whole lot to say in terms of the Darren Waller front. Let's move on to the Denver Broncos. All right, so let's talk about the Denver Broncos here. And the big thing that's going to make or break this team is going to be the quarterback situation here. I have thoughts on this, and I am honestly terrified of what this team is going to be. I have a lot of concerns here. I believe the fantasy reliability of this team is going to be based on the quarterback position. I don't believe in Drew Lock. I'm also not the biggest Teddy Bridgewater fan, but one of the things that I know is what Teddy Bridgewater can do in an offense that has pieces around him, and that's what he did last year for the Carolina Panthers. Now, were the touchdowns there? No, he only had 20 on the year. But what we saw last year was he had 4 players with over 1,000 yards from scrimmage. Mike Davis, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Curtis Samuel, all 4 of those guys had 1,000 yards from scrimmage. And who is his cast here for the Denver Broncos? Melvin Gordon / Javonte Williams. And then you have on the wide receivers, you have Cortland Sutton, Jerry Judy, and KJ Hamler. And then at the tight end position, you have Noah Fant. Now you tell me what quarterback you would rather have if you are drafting one of these Denver Broncos pass catchers. The answer should be Teddy Bridgewater. It should be. You look at the numbers here, and Bridgewater was a better quarterback than Drew Lock was. I feel like we've all wanted Drew Lock to be something, and we need to start accepting the fact that he's not. Right? Like, just Drew Lock is just not a very good NFL quarterback. And it's not to say that Teddy Bridgewater is some world burner, but I know what I'm going to get with Teddy Bridgewater, right? Like, there were weeks last year where we're like, stream Teddy Bridgewater. Would we ever start him on like a week-to-week basis? No. But like, there were spots where you can pick your matchups and be like, this would be a good matchup to start Bridgewater, so with this and this. We never had that with Drew Lock. There is zero consistency. There is zero confidence in starting Drew Lock in your fantasy roster week in and week out. And that just rolls down to the rest of the offense. I don't know if you know this or not, but there were 2 players last year who led the league in missed targets. And that was A.J. Green and Jerry Judy. And Jerry Judy was wide fucking open. There are legit Twitter threads about Jerry Judy being so butt-ass naked open and just the ball oversail, thrown out of bounds, just missed entirely by 5 yards. And that is one of the players that I'm really buying in drafts right now. Like, where you're getting Jerry Judy at, I think you're getting him at a value just because of the potential. It's not like Jerry Judy, I don't think, is going to come out here in year 2 and light the world on fire. But I just think that Jerry Judy is going to enter this Jarvis Landry role, this Jarvis Landry Juju PPR role, to where you're getting him right now at wide receiver 36. So that is basically in the back of the wide receiver 3 range in the 8th round, at 806. And the players who you're drafting him around, I think he has the highest upside of everybody there. So in his range right now is Juju, Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson admittedly has a bit of a high upside, but you'll hear me out. Debo, Jerry Judy, Antonio Brown, Tyler Boyd. None of those players as of right now are really primed to be this explosive all-star stud wide receiver. Maybe Debo Samuel if he's actually healthy, but that's a big thing for him, is health. But what you have in Jerry Judy and what he's supposed to be, that's what I'm banking on. Because again, we saw it last year. Just the numbers didn't match what he was actually doing on the field because of how bad the quarterback play was. So I'm pretty much back in on Jerry Judy, and just being able to evaluate where you're getting him. Again, in that 8th round, I keep looking at the 6th first, but in that 8th round, you tell me that your number 1 wide receiver, again, this is just a year where we can just wait and wait and wait. So let's say we go Tyler Lockett as our wide receiver 1, and then in the 8th, Jerry Judy is our wide receiver 2. I'm pretty okay with that. That's not terrible. Yes, it's a bit raw and it doesn't feel good, but I'm going to buy the outcome compared to what it actually looks like on paper right now. And that brings me to the next player in this wide receiver room that I want to talk about, and that is Cortland Sutton, who's going around ahead of Jerry Judy at 708. And guys, I'm buying the Cortland Sutton bounce back. I am. Cortland Sutton, unfortunately, coming back off that torn ACL. He's still not 100% yet, but I think we're really forgetting just how dominant Cortland Sutton was when he was healthy. I mean, he is just an absolute stud. He's an athletic freak, just a jump ball wide receiver, can just make a lot of really big explosive plays, and that's why I love this wide receiver room for the Denver Broncos. You're looking at 2 dudes who can absolutely be a 1-2 tandem that feel like they're unstoppable because of the vast differences in their play style, with Jerry Judy being this technician and Cortland Sutton being the athlete. So when you look at where Cortland Sutton's going at 708, he's the guy in that same area where, again, if I'm waiting on wide receiver, and if I can get Cortland Sutton as my number 2, oh my god. If you go against waiting on wide receiver, and Cortland Sutton's your number 3 or number 4, even better. So I'm in that, but that's the thing, that's the caveat. On paper right now, I am in on the Denver Broncos wide receiver, outside of KJ Hamler, just because I don't believe that he's going to be anything consistent for your fantasy team this season. But when you look at Sutton and Judy, what they can be, they have all the potential in the world to be the wide receiver tandem that both finish inside the top 24. The only question that I have is who's at quarterback? Again, that's what this whole thing comes back to, because if it's Drew Lock, I'm going to be probably a step or 2 below where I'm at right now. I just believe that Teddy Bridgewater is going to end up winning this job. I think Teddy Bridgewater is the better quarterback, and I think that the way that this Denver Broncos defense is positioned, they're going to need to start Teddy Bridgewater out of necessity just so Drew Lock doesn't fuck this whole thing up. Let's shift gears to the running backs now. Melvin Gordon's in a contract year. This team trades up in the 2nd round to draft one of my favorite running backs, Javonte Williams. And that leads me to one of the most interesting backfields that I can recall. What is their plan? Right? They love Javonte because they traded up to get him. But you're still in a contract year with Melvin Gordon, so that means that you can theoretically run Melvin Gordon into the ground until he has no knees left. And it's all about what you believe for this backfield. And here's how I have it broken down into my head. You may recall last year what happened to Todd Gurley for the Atlanta Falcons. And what ended up happening, if you don't remember, is Todd Gurley was basically a top 12 running back for the first 8 or 9 weeks of last season. It was extremely touchdown dependent, but he was still getting it done, but you could tell that he was losing a step, and towards the end of the year, he was really going to just kind of trail off. I kind of envisioned the same thing happening with Melvin Gordon, where early on in the year, they're just going to pound and pound and pound, but that back half of the year, Javonte Williams is going to shift to become this league-winning type of running back because just the talent is going to win out. They may trade Melvin Gordon, who knows, and try and get something out of him before that contract expires. But as of right now, I'm not overly excited about drafting either. And the reason why is just because if you're going off of the philosophy that I just said, that means that you're going to be drafting Melvin Gordon and you're going to get him for about 8 or 9 games. And then you're going to get Javonte Williams in the second half of the year for 8 or 9 games, right? Just depending on how this backfield and the timeshare actually plays out. But when they're both there, they could be eating into each other's workload. Like I believe that's definitely in the realm of possibilities as well. But where you're getting both guys right now, like Melvin Gordon's going at running back 31 right now at 609, and Javonte Williams is actually going 2 spots ahead at running back 29 at 602. So they're both 6-round picks, and you're not going to be able to have them for half the year unless something crazy happens where one of them gets hurt and you get them for the full season. You're spending a 6-round pick on a guy that you're going to play for, 8 games, if that, right? And maybe Javonte Williams takes over that league-winning role, and congratulations, you have your league winner in the 6th round, but you're going to have to be able to hold him for the next 7 weeks until we actually get to the spot where he's comfortably in the rotation and getting the majority of the work. And that's just the concern that I have about this entire backfield. This is one of those backfields for me where I'm kind of going hands off. I'm looking at this, I'm going hands off. You guys may recall last year we had the whole situation in Buffalo with Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. It's not going to be that bad, but I kind of liken it to Baltimore's rushing attack from last year, where it was Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and Mark Ingram early on in the year, where you just didn't want to start anybody because that backfield was so cloudy and such a mess. That's where I'm at right now. If you got to take your shot on one of these guys, there's 2 different routes you can go. I guess there's kind of 3. 1, you pass on Javonte Williams and you trade for him during week 5, hoping for the breakout. Or you draft Melvin Gordon and you hold him for the first 6 weeks, and then you sell high. You sell high. Hopefully, he starts off the season hot, and you're not going to be left holding the bag. So then you kind of get some exchange for Melvin Gordon in return there. Or you draft Javonte Williams and you just keep him on your bench for the first 6, 7, 8 weeks and hope and pray that by week 9 he comes through, because you're going to be faced with that decision of, oh shit, it's week 5, we're in bye weeks, my team's injured, I need to make a roster move, and Javonte Williams, who hasn't done anything for me in the first 4 weeks, is a possible cut candidate. And if you cut him there, you might not get him back the following week or the next 2 weeks, and because you won't know when the breakout is going to happen. So you're left pigeonholed? I don't know. By just potentially sacrificing and blocking off a roster spot that could be used elsewhere for your team. So that is the uncertainty that I have around the Denver Broncos backfield. And similarly, I also have uncertainty around the tight end position as well with Noah Fant. I'm so much lower on Noah Fant than I am the consensus. I have Noah Fant right now at tight end 17. Yes, that's me burying Noah Fant. He's going to finish higher than that, but that just gives you an idea as to where I'm at with him. Last year, 93 targets, 62 receptions, 673 yards, 6 total touchdowns, but here's the kicker. 4 games as a tight end 1, 9 games as a tight end 2, 1 game as a tight end 3, 15 games played. The majority of his games were in that tight end 2 range. He scored 3 touchdowns on the year last year, I think, right? Why does that say 6? That is incorrect. I literally just pulled it up just a bit ago. Give me a sec. Where is... Let me pull up Sleeper here. Just to make sure, because I literally checked that before I started recording, just so I had it in my head, but now I'm looking at my notes here, and it says 6. So let me vet this, because... Let's see. Game log. Yeah. That should say 3, not 6. Cool. Right, so he only gets in the end zone 3 times. And if you look at his production, pretty much everything, he's getting the targets, he's just not doing anything with them. And is that a product of the offense? I'm not sure. But let me just see if I can show this to you here. This far column here, where are we at? Where are we at? This column right here, it's not great. It really isn't. You're looking at 57 yards, 46, 45, 47, 55, 56, 48. That's not going to do anything for you at the tight end position. It just won't. It just won't. You can't afford that when you're starting one tight end. You can't. And so until I see some level of consistency or higher end production, let's start with that maybe, from Noah Fant, then I'll be bought in. But as of right now, I haven't seen it, and he's not a guy that I want to take a shot on. I would much rather have Jared Cook in the same division. I would much rather have Darren Waller, obviously, Travis Kelsey, obviously, and I just don't have a whole lot of trust or faith in Noah Fant this season. That could change, but as of right now, I'm OUT out on Noah Fant. But honestly, that's it. That's all I have for you today as we just wrap up our preview of the AFC West. So be sure to hit that like button down below. Let me know all of your hot takes for this division in the comments section. Let me know what players you're targeting from this division, what players you think are going to bust, who are you avoiding, all the good things in the comments. Again, hit the like button, subscribe so you don't miss a video from me, follow me on all social media platforms, and I think that's it. Actually, I thought I had one more thing, but that's all I got. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever, and I will see you in the next video. Later.